Thank you all for coming, for being a part of this conversation. I'm really excited for us to get to hear from one another and just experience the beauty of humanity that God's created and drawn us together as Restoration Church. I love that you are willing to be here, and so I love each of you, and thank you for being able to share your story. My hope is that, there's a phrase that says proximity changes perspective, right? And so for us, we're in a room, 6 feet apart, but seeing each other and sharing stories, and it's one thing with all that's gone on in our country the last couple of weeks, specifically following the murder of George Floyd, to see statistics and to see other people's opinions, but to actually engage with people that we know and to hear what your story has been, what's been your experience as a person of color, specifically in the church. What does that feel like? What challenges have been part of that? How has this last few weeks felt for you? And so I'm just grateful for this kind of holy space to share. And so I would love for us to really quickly just introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit, really short about who you are and kind of what you identify as and all that kind of stuff. That'd be, I think, a helpful way to start.
I can feel this one. So I'm Raymond. A lot of people call me Ray. You're the one saying it, so I don't care. But no, I identify as he, him, his. Right? That's the thing to say now. I'm black. And yeah, I'm from San Diego, born and raised. I lived around the country. I've lived in Philadelphia, LA, San Luis Obispo for a little bit, but settled back in San Diego just because of the beautiful weather.
I'm Leslie. I am a mom of 2 little boys. I'm a teacher. That's how I mostly identify myself, as a mother. I'm a wife. I'm Latina. I grew up in Southern California. I've lived here basically my whole life. Yeah, I'm excited to talk to all of you guys.
Hi, I'm Lisa. I am half Chinese, and my mom's side is German and English. I was born in Santa Monica in LA, and then my family moved to East Texas in a little town, not so little now, called Tyler. And yeah, I guess I identify as a mama. I'm a special ed teacher. I love being here and serving at the church, and I'm really excited to chat today.
I'm Kurt. My ethnic heritage is English and Irish, so I'm at war within myself for the last 4 years. I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a pastor, and I have been on quite the journey the last decade about all of the places that I have privilege and acknowledging and understanding that, and so I'm really excited for conversations like this. So.
I'm Kat. I'm a creator is like what I've decided to label myself. I'm a Native American, Indigenous First Nations woman, born and raised here in San Diego, and actually my tribe is located here in San Diego, the Kumeyaay tribe. So my ancestors walked this land, which is a neat thing. But yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm Katie. I identify as a woman, a wife, a mom, a pastor. I identify as a white woman. My family heritage is Hungarian and Swedish. On my Hungarian side, it's all Jewish. So I'm very interested and curious in learning a lot more about my Jewish heritage as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Gisela, and I also am a mom. I identify as a Mexican American woman. I am a wife. My gender pronouns are she, her, and hers. I've lived in California only. I was born and raised in a very small town called Soledad up north by Salinas, Monterey County area, and then moved down to San Diego to start school here, and have been in San Diego since 2001. So I feel like this is kind of my home.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. I would love to hear from your perspective, just to share a little bit, as much as you feel comfortable. How has this last 2 weeks been for you, specifically following, the video that we all saw at some point immediately after Memorial Day of the murder of George Floyd. How has that affected you? What conversations have you had? What has been brewing inside of you? So just kind of what's here in the most recent past and now for each of you?
I mean, for me, you know, when this all went down, you know, that day, you know, it's just so ironic. We were just getting over that New York incident with that woman, and so that video hits Instagram, and that's going viral, and so we're kind of dealing with that. And then it's so funny, my fiance Cindy, I'm on Instagram, and she's, you know, why are you on Instagram? I'm like, you got to see this. And so I could not believe the footage of George Floyd on the ground, you know, saying I can't breathe again, you know, it's happening. And so, you know, you get that rage, but it's also, it's something, we've been here before, and it's the frustrating part, is we've definitely experienced this before, and, you know, we could experience it again, you know, the likelihood's there. So there's a little bit of that, like just so defeated, like, man, we had this fight, we just got, you know, the conversation going about Ahmaud, and, you know, there's just so much going on. And I think what makes this situation unique, and not just every, you know, police murder that happens, is we're having quarantine, right? And so the world is just like itching, and just like everyone's kind of chomping at the bit, and then this happens, and it's just kind of the perfect storm of just a revolution. So, you know, and now it's just, I feel so thankful, you know, for the opportunity to speak about it here, and just to be alive in this moment, because, you know, real change is happening. And so that's really cool. You know, the circumstances are unfortunate, obviously. It's frustrating, but, you know, it's real change is happening, and we can make it happen, which is really encouraging.
Oh gosh, every emotion. I vacillate between anger, hope, frustration, pain, just all of those things. Initially seeing the video a few days after having seen the incident with Amy Cooper, the one you were referring to, and then Ahmaud Arbery, and it's just like also being stuck inside and being confronted with that, and just not having the normal distractions that we always have of work and things, obviously having to just face it. But so glad for that. And you know, I think I was talking with my husband, and like, there's no longer good days and bad days, it's like good hours and bad hours. Like, there'll be times I'll just be crying in the bathroom, like, because I read something that just touched me, and there'll be other times where I'm just so thankful to be alive, like what a time to be alive, and to try to do my part. And so yeah, it's been a roller coaster of all kinds of emotions.
I'm not usually one to research or immediately look at a viral video that has to do with police brutality. I usually will like look at images or read the article, but I, like with Philando Castile or with Ahmaud Arbery, like I didn't watch the videos until looking at a few things, and I think a part of that is just my nature. I'm really pain averse, and I'm one of those people that likes to put their head in the sand. Like, it is just too painful to see that that's real life. And I remember when I was finally ready, I like situated myself on the couch. I was like, okay, I'm just going to allow whatever comes up to come up. I know it's a few minutes long. And I watched it, the video of George Floyd, and I just like, I wanted to turn it off. I wanted to say over and over in my head, like, this isn't real. Like, this is like what you see in the movies or what you see on TV. Like, this isn't real. And I wanted to say that, and it was so challenging and hard for me to stay present knowing that this was real life and this happened in our country, and it's not unique, and it's not new. It's not, it's something that's been happening. And I think I've been wrestling with that shame of like, wow, I've been asleep. Like, I've been so asleep, and this has really challenged me to wake up and to just go to God and like trust Him that He will be the ultimate comforter, and He's available, and nothing is too scary for Him. So I think I'm just alongside you, like the emotions of like outrage and frustration and hopelessness and helplessness and sorrow, like deep grief, lamenting does not come naturally for me. And it's been a really hard process to like allow myself to just be like, this is where we are. And yeah, like we don't have the normal distractions that we're usually privy to right now. And I just feel like God is calling me deeper, and he's just like, I've got you, like we can go there and it'll be okay. Like it's gonna be ugly and painful and hard, but we can go there, like you're ready. And I think I've also been struggling with like a little bit of that like white guilt too, and being non-Black and not really understanding the experience, but still like so wanting to be available and be an ally and be a good listener. So yeah, I just feel like I'm on that roller coaster, and all I want is to just jump into action and be part of a movement, be part of a change. So I feel like there's just like this calling into stillness and listening and silence, and then there's this other piece of like, okay, what's next and what can I do?
I couldn't bring myself to watch it. Today I watched a little bit, and it was really hard. It was really hard. It was, again, I think for me, I'm a very emotional person, obviously. It really just hits deep in my heart because I can't, it's like the unbelievably believable. Like I just can't believe that this is still happening today, and that what I think about is our kids. Like, what do we teach them? How do we go through life navigating this world of where we're supposed to be one big race, and we're not, and it's hard. And I knew what happened. I heard what happened. I saw the post. I saw the social media, but I couldn't watch the video. I couldn't. So, just like everybody, it's painful. It hits deep. I'm not Black, I'm not African American, but I am a minority, a woman of color, you know, and it was hard. It was very hard for me. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to cut anyone else off, but I do want to, I mean, you made a really good point about, you know, what do you tell your children? And, you know, and being Black in America is like, you know, we have to tell our kids, like, you need to know what to do if you're stopped by the police. You need to make sure your hands are seen, don't make any sudden movements because you look like someone that's dangerous. And that's kind of the thing that we're all addressing collectively, which is the issue right now. But it sucks, for lack of a better term, that, you know, I have a 2-year-old and I have a 12-year-old stepdaughter. And, you know, we've had the conversation with the 12-year-old, and we told her, you know, you have to be vigilant, you have to be ready. And it's just, I personally feel like just not satisfied with that being what we have to continue to do, is have that conversation. And that's, you know, it's just heartbreaking.
Right. It's what we call those proactive and protective messages. Like, we have to be proactive so that our kids are ready, and we have to give them those messages of protectiveness. What will you do if this? And what will you do if that? And not everybody has to have those protective messages. Why is it?
Our roommate is half Black, and so a lot of the times I relate these things to him, and that's, I think, the hardest part, because yeah, if anything ever happened to Anthony, I would absolutely take bats to things for sure. And then being a Native American, and Native Americans' history with the police is just as not great, especially in Canada, which there are more Indigenous people there, and that's a whole thing. So then there's the whole feeling of like, you know, I should be doing better too. And I actually had a conversation with my cousin, who is a big Native American advocate and like has gone to DC and like has done the whole thing. And I called him, and it was one of those things where then all of a sudden I then realized how much of a minority I was, because he was the only person that I could talk to in the way that all of my friends are white, everybody in my life is white, and my Native American family is interesting. And so it was one of those things where like I only had Kenny to talk to, and he was the first person I called, and the first thing I said to him was like, I've been such a bad Native American. I've been so bad, like I'm not paying attention, I'm not doing anything. You know, help me, like you know what you're doing. And he's like, well, the fact that you're having this realization is great. He's like, also don't feel bad, and just, you know, he's like, okay, so it's time to start having these conversations. And I told him about this, and the first thing he said to me was like, don't let them tokenize you, which it's coming from a good place, which, you know, is the point. And so then, you know, in the conversation, it was just like, it's good, like you said, like it's good to be having these conversations, and I've been having a lot of them, and been having interactions with people whose reactions are completely different than what I expected in like a good way. And then it's weird to see people's reactions that you were expecting to say something and they're not. You know, where you're like, I thought you'd be all over this and you've been silent, you know? And so there's that weird, interesting combination. But I think I don't process my emotions well. So I think I just like, all I thought was like, well, what can I do? And then that's when I realized like, oh no. I've been really bad at doing things. I should probably get better at that.
Yeah. I think for me, I mean, my initial reaction was just like disbelief. I think, like you had mentioned, Ray, like the rapid succession of like Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor, and, you know, the Amy Cooper thing, and this, it was all just so much all at once. It just, you know, in the midst of pandemic, it almost kind of like I was numb for a second, and then it was like this like mama bear rage, sadness, grief, lament, like swirling emotional storm. And then I think then just something kicked in of just realizing that we can hold all of the grief, anger, sadness, and also see that this is finally moving, you know? People can't ignore it anymore. I can't ignore it. Like, again, like you mentioned, Kat, like seeing people speaking out that I'm like, oh, dang. Okay, and just on social media, the huge wave of energy and advocacy, and response and uprising. So as a mom too, I think I felt this heaviness of, I want our generation, you know, we're the generation now to step in and to fight and do our work and acknowledge the places in us where we do still have our biases unknowingly, to start stepping into the conversations with kids, because, you know, I'm not okay knowing that my black friends are having the talk with their kids. You know, where for me growing up, the talk, all that I knew of it was that's the talk about sex, you know, but to know that, you know, my black friends are having to have that horrific talk with their kids, you know, which is necessary, but to think of what kind of damage that does in the heart and the soul and the psyche of a kid as they grow up. I can't know how that feels, and that breaks my heart. I don't want the next generation of kids having to grow up in that reality. I don't want my kids to grow up in a house where it's not talked about. So I feel like this is a very pivotal moment for us as a community, as a nation, as a church. Man, if we are able to step into and get uncomfortable and let go of what we need to let go of, I feel like God can move in a way that I've never seen, the way that I desire to see him move in my lifetime. So that's a lot. But,
how has being a person of color affected your story in the spaces of, like, when did that become aware to you? And how I mean by that is, when did you feel for the first time that you were treated differently or seen differently? So I think sometimes going back and sharing some of those kind of earlier stories can actually help us move forward. So I'd be curious, maybe for a couple of you, like, what has been a pivotal or a turning point experience for you as it relates to race, as it relates to social, engagement with people, that would help people see you?
When I think about that, like, when I guess did I realize, or when was like the moment? Like, I've always known I'm black, right? I know,
Right.
and I grew up in San Diego, so it's like there aren't a ton of people that look like me. But on TV and movies and my family, I'm well represented. But everywhere I go, I do the scan. I'm the one black guy in the room, and it's just. Kind of back to the talk is it's become so normal, and it's normal to know that I'm the only black person in the space. It's normal for me to know that, hey, I'm the only black person at the school, I'm the only black person in this organization, and so that's become very, very normal for me. But I kind of hate that it's become normal in a way, because it's my experience is completely different than someone else's experience, and I walk into a situation with different intentions. I was thinking about this earlier. My perspective for a long time was to be one of the good ones, to be likable, to be hey, I'm not dangerous, I'm not a gangster, and it wasn't until recently that I realized that's a terrible perspective to have. It's awful because it's like we're talking about with George Floyd. I mean, Philando Castile comes to mind. This is someone obeying the law and doing everything he's supposed to do right, and just because of a prejudice, just because of a bias, gone. And so that kind of perspective is turned on its head, and it's just not enough. Right. So I keep going back to this, but I'm just so appreciative that we're having these conversations now, and that people are starting to see that this is reality for me, and people that look like me.
So for me, I can't say that there was a moment. I always knew that in my house we spoke Spanish. My parents always made a point to talk about their story and where they came from, and they're very much identified with their heritage. My parents immigrated here from Chile, which is a whole other story about oppression and very difficult government circumstances and the things that happened that forced them out of the country that they loved, and I don't think ever really wanted to leave. And so I feel like what is happening more within me now is this realization that I have benefited from white privilege, because I've always known that there was a thing as white privilege. I was a sociology branch major in college, and so we did a lot of reading about race and class in America and the history of that. But in the back of my mind, I was like, well, I'm not white, so too bad, bad on them. Where I'm like, no, wait a minute, you have clearly benefited from this system. I've never walked into a room where I was the only one. I bought toys and dolls that always looked like me. Every time I turned on the TV, there was people that looked like me. I've never been judged immediately by the color of my skin. I feel comfortable going into any room in any space, which now I'm realizing like that looking back on it now in my life, I'm like, yeah, that I never realized that was something a system that I benefited from. And that's been difficult to face and realize that this is my work, like this is all of our work now. And especially as a mom, to have those conversations. I don't remember having those conversations as a kid with my parents, but I had the good fortune of growing up in a very diverse part of the world. My best friend growing up was mixed race, and I'll never forget the first time in middle school, a group of kids came up to her and called her an Oreo, and being so confused about that, and like just having to, and learning from her like so many things about Black culture, and but realizing that that's just the beginning, like that's just the starting point right now. And I'm overwhelmed by how much there's to do, but I'm also excited for the opportunity and happy that, like, obviously this is a horrible tragedy. This horrific thing has had to happen, to move us forward. But I'm thankful for it, and I'm hopeful, and I'm like, our God is not a God of scarcity. Our God is a God of abundance, and He's gonna provide what we need.
I remember on one of my first sessions in individual therapy as an adult, my therapist so lovingly asked me, well, what kind of impact did it have on you being Asian in the South? And I was like, oh, it was fine. Like, I got made fun of sometimes, but, you know, it wasn't a big deal. And he was like, well, how are you made fun of? And we kind of walked through and unpacked what that really did look like. And it's so funny because I feel like with me especially, I really like to bury those painful memories deep, deep down. And it was deeply painful. It was lonely. I was, even though I'm half Chinese, I was 100% of the Asian population in my elementary school. And when my brother enrolled, then together we made one full Asian, and I was 50% of the Asian population. And while the town that I grew up in, you know, desegregation became legal like 40 years before I entered into the school, the town was very functionally segregated. Like, there was literally the other side of the tracks. And that's just how I grew up, and I grew up hearing a lot of directed towards me. It was a lot of just ignorance, like lack of exposure. Hey, does your dad know Jackie Chan, or ching chong, like all these things that were seemingly playful but really deeply painful. Or just things like, were you adopted, or do you eat rice every day, or why isn't your skin yellow? And just a lot of what I felt like was a lack of experience and exposure. And it was just evident that these children, and even sometimes adults, just didn't have other people who were Asian in their lives. And therefore they were either curious or just going off what they have read or seen in media. But it was really hard. Like, I think a very evident thread throughout my childhood and adolescence was a desire, a desperation to fit in. I never felt like I belonged. I didn't belong in the Hispanic group, I didn't belong in the Black group, I didn't belong in the white group. There was this very, sometimes outright and sometimes implicit, like, this is the bad part of town, and this is where you don't want to be. And so I remember some of my friends that had gone to middle school that with me, like my neighbors, would always like make fun of me that I went to the like poor school. And anyway, it was, I don't know, it was just a very unique experience, not having any friends that like looked like me.
The town that I grew up in was primarily Hispanic, Mexican, and some white, some black, some Asian, but mostly Mexican. And still walking into that store, I couldn't touch anything at the checkout stand because they would look at me like, what are you trying to get? No, tell your daughter not to do that. It was just always felt like it was just a lot of us and them. And one time, one of the ladies told my mom is fair skin, a lot, very fair skin. And I remember my brother and her and myself were with her, and they told her, oh, those are really cute kids you're babysitting. What are their names? And Mom's like, those are my kids. Like, why would you think they're not my kids? So that's, for me, that moment where I realized I saw more color. And I was little, and because before that, I don't feel like my family ever talked about race. And we were Mexican, and we grew up in a Mexican town, and people kind of looked like me, so it wasn't really talked about. But when she said that, and I did look at my skin, and I looked at my mom, and I'm like, you're very different. You are different. I don't even look like you. So I look like my dad a lot. So it's interesting, just what people see at first glance. Like, I can make inferences of all of you without knowing your story. I can think you're this or you're that, and I would never know until I ask. So it just makes me think of how many times we walk around with our own, lens of, some kind of degree of colorblindness, I feel.
I think that's a really good point. I think that's something that I was thinking about a lot going into this conversation is when people will say, I don't see color, black and white, it's the same to me. It's one of the most ignorant things that a person can say. I mean, I don't want to offend anyone if that's how they use that, but it's just, we do. I mean, unless you're colorblind, but still if you're colorblind, you'll see shades.
There's something.
Yeah, there's something there, and we all have biases, and we all have, preconceived notions of going into a situation. And I just feel like, from this current movement that we're in, and what, Black people have been saying for a really, really long time, is we're nothing to be feared, and why do you feel the need to weaponize against us in such a hard way? And so it's about changing that bias and about getting more understanding. And that's what I think is a good thing about these conversations we're having, is because more people that, will say, I don't see black and white, are starting to admit that, wait a second, I didn't have that experience. I don't know what it's like to be the only one that looks like me. And so I think that's more powerful than, anything anyone can do right now, is just, just admit that and be comfortable talking about that.
What has it been like specifically in relationship to faith and to the church community? Not necessarily just this one, but just growing up or in your life, how has your race impacted church community for you? What has that looked like? What has that felt like?
I think that's something that could be, vastly different to, your region, right? It's my framework and my understanding of being black in San Diego is sort of like I was talking about earlier, is being the black person. So my experience has been, oh, you're easy to remember because, no one else looks like you, I know your name. But, it's fine, but at the same time, you just want to fit in. It's a big thing. You just want to fit in. You don't want to be different. You just want to be seen for you. Right. I think the Bible, the gospel, is very good about, about race and about fitting in and belonging. And so I think, Christianity on a whole has been very good to being black.
Native Americans in the church. That's complicated. So the missions of California were made to whiten the natives and to convert them, and so. And it's funny because there's actually a Catholic church on the reservation. Like, most Native Americans are Catholic. That's like been the effect of that. And so most Native Americans are Catholic, which is so backwards when you think about it. And I think it's interesting because you mentioned the scan where you like look around the room and like, am I the only person of color in this room? And it's funny because, like, depending on the place, like, yeah, I look around and I'm like, okay, there's people who look like me, but, I get mistaken for Latina and Mexican a lot. And so I get that, like, not fitting in thing.
When you think of our church, right, when you think of Restoration Church, what do you dream of for Restoration Church when it comes to this? What is something that, if you could bring a prayer to our Father, if you could bring a prayer to God and say, God, my dream for Restoration Church is that this would be true, what would that be?
I can speak into that one. My dream for Restoration Church would be diversity, just a variety of people from different economic classes, from different ethnic backgrounds, from different racial backgrounds, people with different abilities. I would love to see it makes sense. Variety is the spice of life, and like I would love to spice up our church. Like I would just love to be in community and be part of a church family where like we're just different and we are learning and challenging and in community with each other, and everyone comes in with their own beautiful experience and we all get to like share that together. And I think that can be really challenging because let's get real, like there's a specific economic and racial profile of people within the 5-mile radius of where we are.
Absolutely.
And man, I would just love to see some variety come on in here. You are all so welcome.
Yes.
Please come.
Man, we were not designed, our souls were not created for homogeneity. We were not created to have our little crew of people that all look and think and act and talk the same way. We just weren't. But if that's all we know, I know, not all of you have experienced that. There's times in my life growing up in Poway, it was a very white school, but everywhere else in life, after high school, I found myself, craving that diversity, longing for that. So I think, Lisa, I agree, there is something in us that is going to desire a more truer reflection of God. The more mature we become in Christ, the more we love and follow Jesus and see this mission play out, the more we are going to desire community and the richness that comes with doing life with people who look different than us.
So thank you all so much for sharing. As we kind of wrap up, the last question I want to ask is, what are some helpful steps or helpful processes to engage in for specifically people of my race, white people that might be wanting to engage? Many people in our church are white, and they want to engage, and they want to know how to begin to be a part of the solution, to help take systemic racism away from our reality as a country and specifically in our church. How can we join you on the journey towards justice?
I think for me, I thought a lot about this question. I prayed a lot about this question. I prayed that I wouldn't get too political because I know that can be divisive, but I really do feel like this is a great opportunity for everyone to listen and learn. I mean, there's a lot of noise out there, and you're going to see all kinds of messages, Facebook, Instagram, whatever, but there's so much opportunity to hear other perspectives and to just be a little open to what could possibly be. There's a lot of really great ideas that some of these organizations have come up with. Supporting those, listening to their, and even if you don't agree with it after reading it, at least ask the why, talk about it, because I think that, that's how perspective changes and that's how change can be made. Unfortunately in our world, it does take a lot of noise to get to change. And unfortunately sometimes it takes, everyone to be on the same page, and that's a really hard thing to do. I can influence my community, but also you can influence your community, and then that community can influence their community, and it just grows like that. So I just think listening to people, talking to people, learning about what's out there, understanding, because I think if we all do that, we can all slowly get to that same page.
Give us an example. What are some people we should be listening to?
I personally am a big fan of NAACP. I feel like they're one of the oldest organizations for Black people. I think that they are doing a lot of things for change consistently. And I think that people forget that because they're kind of in the background. Black Lives Matter is louder. There's so many GoFundMe petitions, and there's a lot. But the NAACP for me is like kind of that authority. They have a lot of movement behind them. Me and my family support them. I think that's a good one. And like I said, without getting too political, I really do think there's a lot of conversation that we have about the way we do policing in America. I think that people need to be open to hearing that. It's scary, the thought of there's the movement, defund the police, abolish the police. It sounds scary, but listening to their ideas is a good way to find what's next and something that you're more comfortable with.
I also don't want to put all the knowledge on my African American friends to say, hey, teach me about this, tell me about that. It's not their job or responsibility to teach me. I'm an adult. I can go out and do the research for myself, and those that I'm in confidence with, that I could ask something more deep and more personal, then I know who I can go to feel comfortable with that. In looking at some of the research and some of the movements and some of the organizations, I came across 75 things white people can do to support the African American community, and there's 75 things. One of the things was exactly what you were talking about, is supporting those organizations, funding them, donating to them, purchasing African American books or books by African American authors. Those tangible things that we could say, okay, order today, and that money goes to this community, that money goes here. So those, I feel like, are more tangible things that we all can do.
You said something really great about the systemic racism and supporting Black authors and supporting Black businesses. And And I think that is hugely important too. And I think that's a really great point. Because, like it or not, systemic racism is real. And it's hard for a lot of black business owners to get to the position that they're at because of all the red tape that they've gone through. So it could be as easy as ordering a pizza from the black-owned pizza place or buying a black author's book, because that can go such a long way in supporting that and nurturing that and growing that.
I think even asking the question is a good first step. Even asking the question like, what can I do and how can I learn more? If you're at that place, I think that's a huge first step. And just, I think what I've come to realize and what I'm hearing a lot from my friends and white friends and all across the board is that to understand that it's not personal, that because you're acknowledging that you are part of a system that is racist doesn't make you a bad person. And I think that is what I hung on to for a long time, was that like, I'm not a bad person. I'm not a racist, but I am part of a system. I benefit from a system of white supremacy, and realizing that that's not anything that I personally ever wanted or intentioned, but that it's okay. It's not about me. And I think learning from Black writers and activists and people that have done the work, have been doing this work for such a long time.
Like we said earlier, we all see differently and we all perceive the world differently, and we have so much to learn from each other. And I learned so much in this time together. And we haven't had conversations like this ever.
And I think circling it back to what you said, Pastor Kurt, about proximity changes your perspective. And I definitely feel that us coming together today and talking about our own experiences, our personal stories, just how we're grieving this process as well, and we're acknowledging it. And this is a first step. And I have learned a lot, like you were saying, and it does bring me a degree closer to you and the church, our family. And I'm very grateful and appreciative of this time. So thank you to the church. This is a first step, and I'm all in. I'm all in to be here with you all, and in our pain and suffering and happiness and joy.
I've heard a lot from my friends who are white, just kind of that counter argument, and there's defensiveness there. And I would just encourage anyone who, and myself included, like, I've been experiencing some of that guilt piece too, and just constantly going to God and being like, Lord, search me. Like, what is here? Like, why do I feel defensive? What is this shame inside of me? How can I work through this? And how can I heal and be a part of your restoration for San Diego?
I'd love to pray for us. There's no 3 next steps here. This isn't a sermon. This is just been a really enjoyable and honest and vulnerable and transparent conversation. For that, thank you. So, can I pray for us? Gracious Heavenly Father, Jesus, the Son, and Holy Spirit that resides in each of us, it is truly only by your power that conversations like this actually can bear fruit. And so I'm just grateful, and we give you the glory for this one. Our world desperately needs more conversations like this, and that will only come by your power at work in people that are aware of it, and even at work in ways that we're not yet aware of. Thank you that that's what you do. You've done it throughout the world, that race and language and cultural diversity and identity was your idea. It wasn't an accident. That you actually designed us this way. And so I pray, I beg you, God, that our community, the Restoration Church, will be a light of a space where people can humbly ask questions, humbly face their own fears and their own implicit biases, that we can actually seek to understand more than we seek to be understood, and that we can welcome all people and all of those people, including all of ourselves. the table that you set. That's the table that you invite us to, Jesus. And so we thank you. You made it possible through your sacrifice for us. So God, thank you for this time. We pray that it honored you. We pray that you would continue to lead us one step forward at a time towards your ultimate goal. And we thank you that knowing you, we can respond to the reality that racial reconciliation